I started reading, and I read the whole Book of Mormon for the very first time while I was in that county jail waiting for extradition. I got his attention and asked him if he was LDS, and he said he was. And I asked him if he had anything to read, and he said he did. He had some ensigns. And for the next week and a half, I think it was next 2 weeks, I read those ensigns over and over and over and over again. That's all I had to read. And it was wonderful.
I'm in a early morning Saturday Bible study, and most of the guys that are in this men's Bible study have been incarcerated at some point. But what's been really phenomenal is seeing the transformation of these people, because you can't do anything but celebrate their conversion to God.
Welcome into another Kia David podcast, another episode here on Zion Media. I'm joined by Trevor the Key Keys and, David the Lion Douglas. And we have a really cool guest for you. We have been working to try and make this happen for the last several weeks. I've got Leland with us, and he reached out to Zion Media through our Contact Us. And when I saw his story, I said, hey, I want to take this one. I want to take this. I want to go ahead and call him and see if there's a story here. And when I actually called him, he was on his way to the temple, and we had a nice conversation. And I thought, hey, your story needs to be shared. I'd love to have you come on our program here at Zion Media and share this story. So, Leland, welcome to the show. And my understanding is you're kind of a fan of the show too. You've been watching many of our episodes.
I have watched probably 90% of your episodes. And I remember the first time I saw you, Shane, was you were on Ward Radio, and I'm a subscriber of Ward Radio and a fan of them as well. So,
well, cool. So you heard the prison story, and that kind of resonated for you. It's kind of like when you've been to prison and you meet somebody that's been to prison, and then you're both members of the church. It's kind of like this badge of honor. You're like, hey, dude, you're like me.
Right.
So cool. Well, Leland, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, I just want to hear your story. That's why we're having you on, is we want to hear your story and kind of your journey.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's an amazing redemption story as well. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's, as we have questions, we'll pop in with some questions here.
Yeah, please do, because otherwise it's going to be kind of boring. So I was, yeah.
You remind me so much of one of my best friends in prison. You look like him. You talk like him. His name's, I call him Streeps. That was his name in prison. We called him Streeps. Same color hair, same beard. So it's cool. So anyways, okay, so ahead.
Cool. Yeah. So basically I was born in Paradise, California. It was my mom and dad were already divorced by the time I was born. So there's where it starts, right? My dad had already remarried, if I remember the story correctly from my parents. So he had already remarried and was married to my stepmom. I grew up in Paradise for a few years, and then we moved to another town. And I spent most of my years growing up there, till high school. Was never a very good student. I didn't like school very much. ADHD, like to the hilt, still to this day. I struggle with just basic things sometimes. But it's a fun struggle. It's something that I don't mind taking on. So I grew up there, and my mom remarried in, I don't know, I think I was 5 years old. I was 4 or 5 years old when she remarried. At this point, I still had no relationship with my father. He lived in another state at this point, and my mom didn't allow him to see me, just because of, I don't know, whatever they went through, I don't really know the whole story there. I just know that my mom never did like my dad. And until I was probably, I don't know, about 8 years old, I was never really allowed to see my father. So I didn't have that relationship in my younger years. Growing up, my mom married my stepdad. He was a good man. When they first got married, he was an alcoholic, but quickly kicked the habit. I don't know how he managed to do that. He was never able to quit smoking. And I picked up smoking about 9 years old because I was following his example. And, he would leave the cigarette butts in the ashtray, and I wanted to be like my example of a father. And so I started picking them up when he wasn't looking. And eventually I would light them, and down the road I was smoking. And, but I was, at the same time, I was being raised in the church by my mom. So I was going to primary. I was baptized at 8 years old. And when I was baptized, as a matter of fact, I still remember the feeling when I was given the gift of the Holy Ghost. I have a picture of that day, and every time I look at that day, that picture, I remember it so vividly. I remember when they said receive the Holy Ghost. I remember just this feeling of tingling going from the top of my head all the way down through my body and into my feet, my whole body, and I remember it very vividly. So growing up after that, like I said, I kind of was a little bit here and there. I was smoking as a child, trying to hide it from my family. Did a pretty good job of that. There was some physical abuse by some ex-boyfriends that my mom had, some things like that affected my life to some degree, but I didn't ever really dwell on it. It never really seemed to resonate with me until I got older. But then I really started thinking about it again. And by older, I mean like in my early 20s is when I started thinking about the things that happened as a child. But as I grew up, I stayed going to church with my mom, even though I never felt comfortable at church, probably because of some of the choices that I was making, like smoking, and I just wasn't living any sort of the gospel at all. I believed it was true. I believed that I would someday live the gospel completely. I always had that feeling, that belief, but I just wasn't ready to live it then, even as a child. And as I got older into my teens, I continued feeling the same way. I hated going to church on Sunday, hated going to school during the week. I ended up at 16, I ended up dropping out of high school and leaving the church, essentially, effectively leaving the church at the same time. I dropped out, moved to where my father was living at this point, moved in with him for a little while in another state. Matter of fact, that was in Missouri. And so moved out to Missouri. This is probably 95, 90, I think it was 95. And I lived out in Missouri for a good 9 months or so. And while I was out there, I gained some experience. I turned 17 while I was out there. And after a few months, I went to church every now and then. I got to know some of the members of the church out there. But I was never very active. I never felt very comfortable going to church. And even though I always believed it. And so, I don't know, eventually I came back to the city I grew up in and stayed there for a little while longer. Ended up moving to Las Vegas for a little bit. Then I went back to the city I grew up in. Just kind of moved around. I was couch surfing a lot. Didn't really have any direction. Had no goals, no ambitions. Just wanted to go here and go there. And I didn't live the gospel at all. I ended up smoking and drinking. I never got into drugs, fortunately. I think that would have been really, really bad for me if I had. But eventually
Did you end up coming back to the gospel? Did you end up?
I did, and I'm going to get to that. Right about 30 years old is when I came back to the gospel. It was 29 at 30. So in my in my 20s, I moved around. I lived in New York City for a little bit. I went to art school in New York for a little while. Worked as a photographer and traveled around the country, and eventually came back. When I got to 29 years old, I did some things that were very regretful, and I felt absolutely horrible about what I had done, and I knew that I had broken the law significantly. And to separate myself from the situation that I had found myself in, I decided to move out to where my dad was living. And so I went out there and I stayed with him again for a little bit. Nobody knew anything other than me and a few other people. And at this point in my life, I was 29, and I decided it was time. It was time to go back to church. Like I said, I had always believed it was the gospel was true. I always believed that I would eventually live the gospel. And I decided it was time to make the commitment to go back. And I did. And to this day, I still have never left it again. But so when I moved out to where my dad's at, I ended up going to the bishop, and I spoke to him, and I told him what I did. And the bishop and I counseled about it for quite a while, over the course of a few months. And I got into some counseling to help me to get over that. I actually started growing up at this point, and trying to hold down a job and trying to pay rent someplace instead of just living on somebody's couch off of their goodness. And I started trying to change my life 100%, like trying to do a 180. And I started succeeding, but then the law caught wind of what happened. And I ended up in prison, and I spent the next 13 years in prison. So from the time I was 30 years old till I was 43.
What was that like? I know for me, it was like when I got arrested, I remember it so vividly. Were you living in a different state than where the crime happened? Did they come and get you and extradite you? Like, how did that happen?
This stuff is so weirdly unique. It's probably people probably would have an issue with believing some of this story, but I'll tell it anyways. It was terrible. First of all, there's nothing about my situation that is funny or about what I did. That's funny, that's acceptable, and I'm 100%. I believe in accountability, and I believe in being honest and true. That's something that I've always held on to in my whole life, no matter what, is being honest. And so, when I went to the bishop and told him about it, it was because I knew that I needed to be accountable, and I knew that I needed to be honest about it. And the law was going to find out about it one way or another, because I was going to go to the law. I just wasn't ready for it when it happened. But I ended up becoming, getting arrested. As a matter of fact, it was an officer that was a member of the church and a member of my ward who came to arrest me. So he took me to county jail. And like you, Shane, I remember it very vividly. It was not the first time, by the way, that I had been to jail, because I had been to jail on numerous petty charges, like tickets and things like that I refused to pay. I was terrible with money. I was very irresponsible with just about everything. So I ended up in jail several times for stupid little things like that, but never any kind of crime up until this point. So it was always a day or two in jail. Well, after a month of sitting in jail in another state, finally some people came to pick me up and extradite me. There was a lady in a van, and there was a few other incarcerated people in the van, and it was a transport company. And she picked me up, and we drove to Nashville, Tennessee, which was about 8 hours from where she picked me up. And we drove to Nashville. Her dad, turns out her and her dad were working together. He had gone out to Florida, and he flew out to Florida and rented a car and drove two people from Florida back to Nashville. And they were meeting up in Nashville to get him and her back together so that way we could continue on the trip. And from Nashville, we ended up going to Pennsylvania, and then to Michigan, and then down to.
At each stop that you make, are you staying in the county jail? Are you staying in that county jail, or how are they?
We stayed. This was a 7-day trip that we ended up taking, and I think 2 or maybe 3 of those nights we stayed in a hotel. The rest, or I'm sorry, not a hotel, in a county jail. The rest of the time, the county jails wouldn't even let us stop to use the restroom. We were using rest stops along the way. And we would be shackled up and get out of the back of the van and have to go use the rest stop. And people would see us getting out of the van and they'd just drive right on past, wouldn't even stop. And at one point, there was 6 of us in the back of this van. And the bench in the back of this van was maybe 6 inches wide.
Did they at least have you cuffed in the front? You weren't cuffed behind, were you?
So we were cuffed in the front and shackled. So we had cuffs. We had the chain, the belly chain, so we were shackled with our arms. I don't know if you can't see me, but
yeah. I know what you're talking. The worst is when you're cuffed behind my back for like a 8 hours straight, and it's the worst. Yeah. It's the worst.
It's so terrible.
They have you right there. Still sucks, but
oh yeah. Yeah, it was terrible. So we were cuffed for 7 days. By the time we got to my destination, my hands and wrists and ankles and feet were so swollen it's not even funny. And they didn't even have shackles that fit me, so it was like one click, So yeah, that was a terrible experience. We ended up driving all around the country. Went to we picked people up at, I think, 14 different county jails around the country. And it wasn't like we did a big circle. No, we went here and then back over here and then back over there and then halfway that way. And just, it was all over the place. And before we finally made it to where I needed to be. And I was the last person, and it was 7 days that I was in the van. I was the first person in the van and the last person in the van.
And so then they finally take you to a county jail, and this is the county where the crime was committed.
That's correct. So I get to the county jail, and then I'm processed in, which includes basically, they put you in a cell for a while. They leave you in there wondering what's going to happen next, and then they bring you out. Nobody tells you anything. They bring you out. They take you over to a shower. They make you shower. They give you the clothes. They're, the jail clothes. They're like scrubs basically. And then they stick you in another holding cell with 20 other people, and no place to sleep, no place to get comfortable. Toilet out in the open. There's 20 other men. There's no women in there, of course. But so I'm stuck in there. Food's terrible, like you said the other night when you were telling your story again. And I just dealt with it. I didn't really have any complaints. I didn't really, I kind of understood what the process was going to be, having been through, a smaller version of it in the past.
During this time period, are you like saying these silent prayers? Like, where are you at in? And I asked this question because I've been there. I know where you're at, and I know it's the unknown is scary. You're around a bunch of different people.
For all kinds of different types of crimes.
Yeah. What was processing through your mind as far as like the spiritual stuff?
Okay, so spiritually speaking, while I was in the first county jail where I was arrested, my dad had brought me my scriptures. And so I was able to read. I had started reading the Book of Mormon when I moved to my dad's. I had started reading it for the very first time. Never read it before. I've read in it, but I'd never read the whole book. So for the very first time, I was starting to read, and I just opened up page 1, First Nephi, chapter 1. And actually, I started from the introduction, and I read through the whole introduction as well. And so I went through all that, and then I started reading, and I read the whole Book of Mormon for the very first time while I was in that county jail waiting for extradition. And by the way, if they didn't extradite me that day, they were going to let me go the next day. Yeah, because they can only hold you for so many days. So, so they were going to let me go the next day. So I had a little bit of hope of getting out. And I had no idea how much time I was looking at. The state I was in, they told me that I was looking at maybe 2 years of probation. That's for the crime that I had committed. That was another state, not the state that I had committed the crime in. But they told me that I would probably get 2 years of probation. So, I was thinking it was not going to be any big deal to begin with. But I did a lot of praying like you did. And, but I never felt sorry for myself. I was angry, very, very angry with myself for going to, for committing the crimes that I had committed, for just going so far down. I was just angry with myself. And so finally I just broke down and prayed and told Heavenly Father how sorry I was and hoped that He would help me through the process. Again, I started, the repentance process, but this was a whole nother thing, going to jail and knowing that I was going to be in there for a bit. But
go to the bishop and lay it out to the bishop. And then it's a whole nother thing when you're incarcerated and you're thinking about everything that you did. It's like you repented, and it's like there's a whole nother repentance that happens again when you're dealing with facing charges and prison time.
Something people don't know is just exactly how mechanical and cold the situation is. You're just a number. You're nothing. You are nothing to anybody. And you are literally just a number. They don't care who you are. They don't care about you. They don't care what you did, why you're there. They don't care where you're going when they're done with you. They don't care. They're just cold. And, there are people, I don't want to say everybody, but I'm just talking about the system. The system is cold and doesn't care. It's unfeeling. It's inhuman. And, from time to time, I had an officer who cared. I don't want to say that nobody in the system cares. From the time that I was, originally arrested, the officer that picked me up felt sad that he had to come and pick me up. He, treated me as a human. He let me sit in the front seat. And so, but the system itself is just very cold and unfeeling. And most of the people that you deal with, you're only going to see them for a minute or two. And they're moving on and you're moving on, and they don't care what happens. You're just another number to them, So,
into the county jail you're assigned, you get processed in there. Talk about what's going on then spiritually at that point when you finally get settled in, at least to that county jail.
Well, the first thing I did is ask him for a Book of Mormon, because my scriptures had been taken from me, which I think is unconstitutional, as a matter of fact. But they had been taken from me, so I didn't have them. And I'm not getting into the constitutionality of anything either, really. None of that really matters at this point, because it's so long ago and I'm moving forward. But there was a lot of things that I could probably point out that were handled incorrectly. But I did lose my scriptures, so I asked him for a Book of Mormon, and it took a few days, but I finally got one, and I read the Book of Mormon another 2 or 3 times during the 3 months that I was waiting for my hearings to be all done. I ended up taking a deal. Basically, I cooperated with the law 100%. I told them what I did. I told them, I just owned up to 100%, and I'd do it again. 100% owned up to it. I would do it again the same way. Now, that being said, I now understand that when they say that anything you can or anything you say can and will be used against you, they mean to the fullest extent. They're going to use every ounce of everything that you say against you, 100%. So I tell people, don't say anything. Don't talk, don't tell them anything, don't do anything. Just tell them you have the right to remain silent, and you're gonna
work through your attorney. Work through your attorney, and,
Right.
and that's as much as you want to be open and transparent. They will take everything and they will use it to the fullest extent.
Yeah, I would do it. I would do it differently. But I still 100% believe in open transparency. I would do it differently. I wouldn't do it with the police this time. Like you said, I would do it with my attorney now.
Right.
But I felt like I was helping. I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I just wanted to clear everything up. And so, but that being said, because of my open transparency, I was given 10 years to life, which means 10 years of incarceration, and after that, a possibility of parole, with parole for the rest of my life.
But they could have kept you in there for the rest of your life.
They can. They could have kept me in there for the rest of my life, and on top of that, I'm on parole for the rest of my life, or for the foreseeable future. From my understanding, I can get off of it eventually. Yeah. So and with that, I ended up doing 13 years. I have friends that did 20, 25 years on the same sentence. For the same.
You take a deal, attend to life.
Yeah.
And then you go from the county jail. Now you go to prison.
And by the way, the deal was taking one 10 to life or multiple sentences, which then you have to, then you got to do 10 years plus another 10 years plus another, you know what I mean? So the deal was one 10 to life or multiple sentences. And some people don't understand that. They don't understand, well, how is 10 years to life a deal? And it's really not, but it's still better than having to do multiple consecutive sentences, because it's one after another after another. So I took the deal. And part of that was to keep anybody else from having to deal with my bad behavior. It was to protect the people who I had already hurt. Is why I chose not to go anywhere near the courtroom in terms of a trial. I didn't want anybody to have to be brought up on a stand, to have to testify, anything like that. I didn't want my family or anybody else's family or anybody in the situation to have to deal with anything more. So I just wanted to have it over with and done with, without them having to be involved.
So you take the deal.
Yep.
Did you think, like, in your mind, did you have an idea, like, how long did you think you were going to do, and how do you, it's still not knowing, right?
Yeah. So when I first got to the county jail, where I was going to be staying until my trial, or until my case was handled, I asked the processing officer how many years I was looking at, because in the other state, they told me that it would be 2 years of probation would be the maximum sentence. So, and they were right based on newspaper articles from that state that I've read. That's what I would have got there. However, in the state where I committed the crime, the penalty was 10 years to life. And they told me that right from the start when I got in there, that's what the penalty was. And it's a mandatory minimum. So it couldn't even been anything less than that.
So when you say mandatory minimum, I know what that means. That means a minimum of 10 years. Like, you're not doing less than 10 years.
Right. The judge cannot sentence me to anything less than 10 years to life, or life with the possibility of parole after 10 years is what that means. So that is a mandatory minimum.
You kind of knew that's what you were looking for. So when you got that deal, it's like, this is what I'm going to get.
Yeah, I've already processed it. I had 3 months to process it. and deal with it. And quite honestly, I just kind of was letting the system happen to me. There was nothing I could do about it. The system's way bigger than the individual. I'm not particularly good at knowing how to fight situations like this. I couldn't afford an attorney if I wanted to. I had absolutely zero resources, zero funds. I had nobody really in my corner except for my immediate family who knew that I was guilty, but they were still there for me. Most of my friends had pretty much abandoned me. And so I was
Mode of just like, okay, to God, I surrender.
exactly, that's where I'm at. Just hands up and take whatever comes. Yeah.
So talk to me about your spiritual progression. You had already alluded to that you spent 13 years in there, but I don't want to skip over that because I feel like
Yeah.
you spent 13 years in prison. There's a lot that goes on during that time. Talk about your spiritual growth during that prison sentence.
Well, so first of all, county jail was terrible. It was horrible, and that's how it's meant to be. And then once you get processed through and you're done and you go into prison, you go through the what we call in Nevada, in the state that I'm at, we call it the fish tank. And in the fish tank, it's intake. In intake, you pretty much don't have anything. It's kind of like county. You're just stuck in a cell with whoever your cellie is. And I didn't have a cellie, was never given a cellie. And so I had no idea what to do. I didn't know that I could order a canteen. I didn't know that I could write letters. I had nothing for the first 3 months that I was in there. I had zero, nothing. And when I say zero, nothing, I mean, I had the jumpsuit that they gave me when I came in, and I had the paperwork that they made me sign and gave me a copy of. And that's it.
No book
for 3 months.
no
books?
scriptures.
Nothing. I was in a cell by myself. And I was pretty traumatized too from some things that happened when I first got in there. There was some pretty bad backlash to me originally from some people that I knew in there, and it didn't go well right away. And so I was pretty traumatized. So I was afraid to talk to anybody around me because I was afraid, that somehow they might magically get to me, or you don't know what you're dealing with. You don't have any idea, and I didn't have anybody to counsel me, or I was literally.
You bring up fishing in. It reminds me of when I was in what you refer to as the fish tank. I was in intake. I was in cell, and I actually had a cellie, and literally there was like 6 of us in there, and there was one shower, and I remember they let everybody else get out, and I remember a dude going into the shower, and it wasn't my turn to shower, and I remember these other 3 guys get together, and they go in and they jump this dude, and they just beat the crap out of this dude in there. I'm doing, gosh, what is, and fortunately it wasn't me they were after this other guy, but I'm just going, what have I got myself into? I'm watching these guys just beat the crap out of this guy. And one of the things I was told was, as much as I wanted to help this defenseless person, they're like, you don't know what's going on. If you insert yourself,
You mind your own business.
Yeah, you just mind your own business in there. And so, these guys had made little shanks and they're stabbing this guy, and I'm in this cell. I'm like, what is going on? And I never wrote my parents and told my parents, and anything I told my parents, I'm like, yeah, it's cool. It's no problem. I rarely even share the stories of the things that happened in there because I don't, but I know what you're dealing with. And so, you go in there and you don't know who's going to, green light you or come after you, or why they're going to come after you. So 3 months and you're minding your own business. You don't even want to talk to people. So I know it. I get it.
Right. So, and so I'm just in a cell by myself for the next 3 months. Because of that experience, they put me in what they call PC, protective custody, which means that I couldn't have a cellie at that point. And by the way, I just want to point out, I was never shanked. I just got jumped really bad by 6 guys. And so I don't know. I was too scared to reach out to anybody around me and talk, because I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't know, they're just voices in a cell. You don't know who they are. Your next door neighbor starts trying to talk to you, and you get this little fishing line comes around the corner, and they're trying to get something from you, some coffee or whatever you might have, and I didn't even engage with anybody.
No, they literally will create these strings through sheets or whatever they'll use, and they'll tie something up, and they'll shoot it from one cell to another cell. And if you have like coffee or candy bars or something, you can like tie it back and they'll reel it back in, or you can ask, hey, do you have anything? And they'll shoot it over to you. And so there's this fishing that goes on because you can't get out of your cell. So they're shooting these lines all over the place with this stuff. It's pretty crazy, actually.
Hey, I've seen people make little ramps so that way if you're on the top tier, and because we had 2 floors, they shoot a little ramp out from under their door, and it pops up because the way they fold it, so they'll shoot it out and it'll pop up. And if they do it just right, they'll be able to take whatever it is at the end of whatever their weight is, and they'll cast it under their door, and it'll shoot out and jump over that ledge down to the bottom floor. That somebody from the other side will do the same thing, and they'll shoot it across, and eventually somebody will connect the two, and now you're passing stuff from one top cell to another across the way. It's crazy. Siege when you have 24 hours a day to do nothing but sit around.
You're stuck in a cell. Totally.
People are pretty in there.
So during those 3 months, like, what is prayer like for you? What kind of conversation?
It's pretty constant. I'm just kind of speaking out loud, whatever I feel is on my heart. There was a time where the weight of it was so heavy on me that I had considered suicide. What's the word I want to say? Deleting myself.
Yeah, self-deletion.
Self-deletion. But it was never really a serious thought, but it actually, I used that to get out of the situation that I was in, because nobody was going to help me. The COs weren't coming to help, so the next morning, after I got jumped, I was coming out for breakfast, and they told me if I came out of my cell, it was going to be really bad. And so they stuck me in that cell for the next 7 days. I was just locked in that cell with people walking around me, and just rumors were being spread that weren't true. Just all kinds of nasty things that none of it was even close to being true. But people in there don't care what's true or not. They do not care what's true or not true. What they care about is what gives them excitement in that situation, And so all kinds of rumors were being spread about me and, why I was there and stuff. And so people were coming by and throwing the most foul and disgusting things under my door, and yelling things through my door, and kicking my door all day long, all night long. It was for 7 days. And it was absolutely terrible. The whole tier was just raging, basically, against me because of the rumors that had been spread that weren't true. And so, when they finally called me to take me over to the medical unit to do my medical processing, one of the things they do is, as part of the medical processing, is a psych evaluation. And I told the guy I was suicidal. And so they took me out of that cell, and I knew it would take me out of that cell. And it was a calculated thing that I did. And they put me in suicide watch for 24 hours. And then they put me in a cell in the medical unit where nobody knew anything about me. Nobody knew me. And it was
a safe place.
Huh?
Essentially a safer place.
It was a much safer place, 100%. Still by myself, still didn't have any books, still didn't have anything. I was able to get out once a day to walk around the tier. And again, afraid to talk to anybody. But people would call me over to their cell, and slowly I would talk to them. But after I left that medical unit, they took me back over to the intake unit, but they put me in a different place. And that's where I say I was afraid to talk to anybody or engage with anybody. And I spent the next 2.5 months basically.
So then, did you finally get to an area where it's safer?
I think I'm about to answer your question. So at the end of this 2.5 months, one day, I'm in, it's easier for me if I give numbers. So I'm in cell 83. 84 is the last cell on my tier. And, so I'm in cell 83 and the vents, you know how we can talk through the vents? Okay. So my vent is connected with 83 or with 84.
You communicate through the vents in there. You talk through the vents so you can say things and it travels through the vent to the other cell. And so that's how you communicate with people when you're in a cell.
How far? Like just next door, or can you go far?
Just right next door. It's just right next door. Like if you're in an apartment, it would literally be the next apartment. Just the walls, maybe 6 inches thick of concrete, but there's a vent and the vents, it shares it. The two cells share the
Do you talk to both sides, or is it just one side?
Only one side, just whichever side you share the meat.
I just want to make a note that it's at 41 minutes was the first time I said anything on this podcast.
I can't believe it's been that long already. Okay. So, I wake up one morning. I don't have any idea what time it is. It's light outside. That's all I know. I have a 4-inch slit of a window that's horizontal up by the ceiling. So I can't even get up and look through it. Cause it's too close to the ceiling. And so I wake up, it's light, and 2 guys had been moved into the cell next to me that, in cell 84 the day before. And, I didn't know why they were talking so loud, but they were talking loud enough that I could hear their conversation fairly clearly. I could hear at least, several of the words out of every sentence. And the one word that I heard perfectly clearly was Moroni. Now, I'm thinking to myself, I could explain why anybody would say Mormon, but why would anybody say Moroni unless they're a member of the church? Right? That's what I was thinking. And so this person was obviously familiar enough with the Book of Mormon to know the name Moroni. So this guy eventually came out to go to the shower, and I got his attention. He was escorted to the shower by a guard. I got his attention and asked him if he was LDS, and he said he was. And I asked him if he had anything to read. And he said he did. He had some ensigns. And so he convinced an officer who apparently also was LDS the next day, an officer that he knew, to drop the magazines off to my cell the next day. So I finally had something to read, and it was 3 ensigns. There's a conference issue and 2 other. And so for the next week and a half, I think it was next 2 weeks, I read those ensigns over and over and over and over again. That's all I had to read. And it was wonderful. At that point, after 3 months of having nothing but the jumpsuit that I have, my underwear, and a toothbrush without any toothpaste, it was pretty wonderful to have those ensigns. So I read them over and over and over. Eventually, after about another 2 weeks, I was called into what's called a classification. To classify me is, where they were going to send me and what kind of an inmate was I going to be. And so they classified me and no longer determined that I needed protective custody. So they moved me in with this other guy I was going to be transported within the next week, they told me. Well, I didn't know that the morning that I was being going through my classification, the guy next door to me, that was LDS, the LDS guy stayed, but his cellie got released that day. So I went back to my cell and I was going about my business, reading my ensign or whatever. And they called me and told me to pack up my stuff, that I was moving and how much to pack up. So I told them I was ready to go. And they moved me over to cell 84 with the LDS guys. So my first cellie in prison was a Latter-day Saint. And this guy had spent 7 years at the very same prison that they were going to be sending me to. Knew tons of people there, had all kinds of friends there, and had only been in the prison we were currently at for about 3 months. And what happened was he was walking down there's streets that run throughout the prison. They're just like tracks, like at a high school or something. And so he was leaving the culinary. He was leaving after breakfast, him and some friends, and one of the guys that he was with was in a wheelchair, and he was walking next to the wheelchair, and some guards were coming through a crowd of people and pretty much showed up out of nowhere from his perspective. And a female officer bumped his arm, just barely bumped his arm. And that was an offense good enough to put him in the hole. And because he was in the hole, the day that I heard the day that he moved in was the day before I heard him say Moroni. And now he's my cellie. So I look at this whole thing as kind of like a tender mercy just for me. Him being moved to the yard that I was at, him getting put into the hole, and now he's my cellie and he's LDS. And he was able to help me learn how to get canteen. He was able to help me get books from the library. He was able to help me to find out how to send mail and get paper that I needed, and pencils and other supplies. And he pretty much schooled me in what to do and all this stuff. And for me, this whole thing for me was just, I was terrified to move in with him because the situation that I had found myself in when I first got there, but I had enough faith. And I see Heavenly Father's hands in every little thing, everything. And I saw it all over this whole situation. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're still there. We just went big on you, so keep talking.
Okay. Yeah. I see Heavenly Father's hands all over this whole situation. And for me, it was a tender mercy that you can't even understand unless you've been through it.
And so is it so nice to be able to talk to him, just to have somebody to talk to?
Yeah. And it turned out the reason they were talking so loud is because he had a TV. So I was also able to watch TV for the first time. But no, it was great. We had scripture studies every day while I was living with him. We talked about gospel stuff. He told me all about the yard I was going to be transferred to and what it was like, and how the people were there, and so the yards were there.
Transferred. When you finally get transferred, talk to me about the spiritual progression, and do you have any stories you want to share from the time that you were in there?
Yeah. Okay. So I get transferred to this other yard, and they call it a programming yard. It's a yard that if you're there, you have to be doing something to program, some kind of a program. It could be school, it could be working. It could be considered a program, but you had to be doing something in order to stay there. And I joined a program right from the get-go when I got there. It was a boot camp style program to just kind of have something to do. And so I started off in that, and I came to the realization that even though I believed the church was true, that up to this point in my life, I had only ever believed it was true because I believed my family. And this is the point where I finally realized that I needed to get my own testimony of the gospel. I'd read the Book of Mormon now probably 4 or 5 times. So I had access to go to the chapel, and every night of the week, there's different services, two different services every night, different religions for every service. And so I thought, you know what, I should go to every service and see what they're all like and see what they all teach. And throughout this whole thing, I determined that I was going to continue to go to the LDS service, and I was going to read the Book of Mormon again. And so I started going to every service. I went to the chapel 7 days a week, usually stayed for 2 services every night. There's nothing else to do at night except watch TV, and I didn't have a TV, neither did my celly. So I took this as a great opportunity to do that. And even if I had a TV, it wouldn't have mattered. I had done it. So I started going to church every night, and I went to every service, and every now and then I would find something about a service that just didn't sit right with me, and I would pray about it, and usually that would be the end of me going to that service. And in the end, I was left with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I came to the conclusion that was the gospel, that was the truth, that the Book of Mormon was true. By the time I was done, I had read the Book of Mormon another 3 times. And so now I'm up to something like 6 times. And I had a solid testimony of that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true church. Well, it has the fullness of the gospel. I think every church has truth in it. I believe that every religion is full of truth, but I don't believe that they have the authority to act in the priesthood. I don't believe that they have the fullness of the gospel, and they certainly don't have the wonderful Book of Mormon.
Totally. Okay, so I have to do my, I don't know, we don't call it home teaching, but my ministering guy, he just texted me, and he's like, hey, I'm outside. You ready to go? So guys, I got to go do some ministering and wrap this. Trevor and David can kind of wrap this up. This has been, dude, I love stories like this because I love the prison stories. And I know we're getting close to the end here. We usually go about an hour. But dude, I love these testimonies.
I'll try to wrap it up.
What's cool, make sure you share the fact that you didn't get excommunicated and that you got a temp wisdom and parole, which is incredible. Yeah. I thought it was the only one. Like, oh, I thought I was the only one. Oh, there's another one. That's good too. Okay. I got to run, guys. Leland, thank you so much. I'll let Trevor and David take it from here.
Sweet. Sounds good.
So we just lost our other ex-con. So
nah.
How are we gonna do it? Let's talk bad about him while he's gone.
Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't talk bad about Payne.
No, same. Me and David love him.
Well, I know I need to wrap this up, so let me make a few quick or point out a few quick things as quick as I can possibly make it. I tend to talk too much. So Shane mentioned that I wasn't excommunicated. He's correct. I don't know how that happened, but I was never excommunicated. I expected when I got out that I would be excommunicated because it didn't happen while I was in. Everybody that I was around had been excommunicated, with the exception of one other guy. And actually that person had gone through the church's, what do they call that now when they do the trial?
Disciplinary
court of love or something like it. Disciplinary. Yeah. So he had gone through the disciplinary council, and they actually determined that he was innocent. And he also fought his case to trial in the court, which is where they found him guilty. But the church and the people who knew him best had determined that he was innocent of the crime he was doing. So he was kind of a different situation altogether. But everybody else that I knew in there had been excommunicated. I functioned in there as a facilitator. Sometimes I was the lead facilitator, sometimes the assistant facilitator, which in prison terms is like the only comparison that you could really make, and it's not a comparison at all, is being kind of like the bishop. I was kind of like people saw me as a spiritual leader, simply because I stepped up to, take the lead. I was the go-between between the people who came to church and the chaplain, basically, and or the warden or any other, sergeants or lieutenants that got involved. I was pretty much the go-between. So, there was no priesthood authority. There was nothing like that. But a lot of people in the LDS group would come and talk to me about, wherever they felt that they needed to talk about or get off their chest to. So people looked at me somewhat as a leader in that respect. But I worked in the education department for the last half of the time that I was there. I was able to learn how to keep a job for the first time in my life. I loved it, had a great time, learned a whole lot of good skills. I went to the parole board after 10 years and they denied me, my parole just for no reason whatsoever. I had never had any disciplinary, nothing. They just had determined that I hadn't done enough time according to them. So that was to be expected. I was not surprised at all. So I went back to doing what I was doing before I went to parole and continued on my way.
So
And
was it considered, Shane, I wanted to ask a question that is about being on parole, not being excommunicated. Is it kind of a miracle when you hear about someone that hasn't been excommunicated since you were around others that
I don't know about miracle. It's not very common. Most of the time when people
Yeah.
go to prison, they are excommunicated and sometimes without any kind of a hearing. It just happens.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the reason that I was not excommunicated is because I had already started the process of repentance with my bishop before I ever went. And we both understood that I was probably going to go to prison. So, because I had already shared with him my intent to include the law, and let them know what I did because, accountability, right? So,
so then, so I guess, when it comes to ending, or wrapping up, what would you say is like the biggest thing that you've taken from the whole experience?
Well, my entire life is 180 degrees different from where it was. So, that might be the biggest thing. Well, I wanted to mention, Shane asked me to talk about the fact that I was able to get a temporal recommend. So when I got out, I still had the Aaronic priesthood, and I hadn't progressed to the Melchizedek priesthood. Mm-hmm. So after, I don't know, a couple months of being out, my bishop and I had determined it was time for me to go ahead and move forward with the priesthood. Once I did that, I had an interview for the temple with him and then with the stake president. It was known by both the stake president and the bishop, and they had to go through some process. I don't know if it went all the way to the first presidency, but it had to go up the chain, at least to the church office before I could be accepted for receiving a temporal recommend. And at length I was able to get it, and I was able to go to the temple and do my endowments and go through everything else. And now I go to the temple once a week. So, and I've been doing this for about 3 years now.
Amazing.
I took so much away from that experience. Look, when I went in there, I was an immature idiot who had never, I had zero understanding of responsibility. Now I'm just a 180 degree different person from where I was then. Amazing.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It's really important for, honestly, what I got as just a ending thought is that, I really have taken for granted growing up and the life I've had. And the reason I say this from the perspective, because I'm a convert, this is the first time we're meeting, but I think you probably, you're a fan of the show, so a little bit. But yeah, I take it for granted the experiences that I had, and then at the same time, it reminds me of my friends that I have. I'm in a early morning Saturday Bible study, and most of the guys, it's mainstream Christians that are in the Bible study, and most of the guys that are in this men's Bible study have been incarcerated at some point. But what's been really phenomenal is seeing the transformation of these people, because you can't do anything but celebrate their conversion to God and their desire for good. There's one guy that's in there that even he does street corner preaching now, or before in his life he used to literally try and run from the Bible. So we really appreciate you sharing your story and what you had to say. Trevor, did you have any remaining thoughts that you wanted to share too?
No, I just wanted to make sure, did you get everything out? I know we're wrapping up here. Kind of Shane bounced on us, and these are your immediate reader. Yeah. Well, I mean, there anything else you want to share?
I guess maybe I should share the reason why I wanted to come on to Zion Media. The reason I wanted to share my story is really just because there's other people out there that have been through similar situations as Shane and myself, who they get out and they experience different circumstances. Their bishops might be different. Their stake presidents might be different and have different viewpoints. Everybody's human, right? So there's hope no matter who you are, no matter what your situation is. There's hope for people like me to be able to continue in the gospel. And if you find yourself struggling in a situation where maybe your bishop isn't agreeable, just keep trying. But remember that the number one thing that you have to focus on changing. You have to be that change. You can't be the person you were before and expect the bishop to go along with you just because you're telling them some good story. You actually have to change. And that's the one thing that I want to get across to people. I hope that everyone that I spent time with that ever gets out can get back to church, and in the same across the country, around the world.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, I just think, of all your brothers, your sisters, your family members, if you had anyone in that situation, your heart goes out to them. It's broken because of what's going on. And, the prayers of your family, your friends, are probably what gets you through it, and just rooting for you to make the comeback. And I'm super.
And I did have quite a few people. Who stuck with me, mostly my family, few friends, and the wonderful people. They're all still friends today, and the friends that I lost, sadly, I lost the world, right? The friends that I have now are strong. They're members of the church mostly, and they're people who love and care for me, and they know my past. I tell them. I'm open with the people that I care about, and I feel like it's important for people to know, who I am, so that way they can see that change.
It's a powerful comeback story for sure. Thank you.
Leland, we're grateful you came on, shared your story. I want to do a couple of plugs really quick. Our Discord server has blown up. We just launched it 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're now at 229 members. That is the after party of Zion Media. It's really cool. You can meet all of us in there, friend us, chat back and forth. Discord, imagine like Facebook, like a group Facebook, but with like channels and being able to find David and message David, me, everybody that you see in the comment section. We've got channels for Latter-day memes, conspiracies, artwork. People have been posting pictures of their animals. I've been getting a kick out of that. But it's just super fun. It's an after hours place to connect. We're sharing ideas on Zion. I saw something today. We've got a structural engineer, a civil engineer, an architect. All of these people are just kind of like coming together, and they're like, we're ready to build Zion. Like, what is next? And it's a really cool community. So we'll flash it in the comments as this video is going. We've got an amazing administrator in their souls. Thank you so much for your hustle and your effort. It's a lot of work. She's putting in hours and hours every single day. She's moderating our live streams and our premieres, and our heart goes out to her. We're so grateful. And all of you other guys who are mods in there, thank you guys as well. I also want to mention on December 21st of this year, we're doing an event, just like a month and a week away in Salt Lake City. It might be Davis County, it might be Salt Lake County. Right now we're looking for venues, but it's just going to be a free event that we're going to have some speakers. We're going to have some musicians. We'll have a social event, some food. It might be 20th and 21st, but the 21st is the main event, similar to what we did at Emerald Ranch. And we're just in the process right now of lining up and coordinating some good speakers. April the 3rd and the 4th, I think I got the days right. It's Thursday and Friday before General Conference in Salt Lake City. We're doing ZionCon. This is the only paid event that we're throwing the entire year, but this is going to be a big event. And we're looking and scouting out places. Shane was down at the Gallivan Center today with James the Mormon. We've got Alex Boyer who's performing. I think we have a soft commitment from Gentry who's going to be performing, and we're looking to get some really cool speakers in there. We're going to have a main event and then break-off groups where you can go and, pick and choose the speakers that you want to go to. Really huge networking event. And our goal is to try to get thousands of people to come out to that. So really looking forward to that. And like and subscribe, you guys. Like, it really, really does help us. I think the latest stat that I saw is 61% of our viewers are not subscribed. Boggles my mind. We're at 11,000, almost 11,200 subscribers, but almost more than 60% of you are not subscribed. So please subscribe. You can turn on notifications, turn off notifications. And it's the biggest way that you guys can help us. If you've liked simply one of our videos and you want to thank us back, that's the best way to do it. So we appreciate you guys tuning in to Zion Media. For myself, David the Lion Douglas, and our amigo Shane, who has gone to home teach. I still like saying home teaching. And Leland, thank you for joining us, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you guys later.
Clear and know just what to do through every trial, through every shadow. I'll seek the light that breaks the night. I wanna know the deeper meaning. I wanna see His guiding light. I'm seeking Zion, I'm seeking truth. I'm searching for the way to find my place with you. I want the promise, I want the call, to know my purpose here, to give to you my all. I hope to hear the words unspoken, the still small voice that stirs my soul. I long to see the heavens open, to know my calling sure, to know I'm truly whole. Through every trial, through every shadow, I'll seek the path that's narrow and true. I wanna hear the voice of angels. I wanna stand where skies are blue. I'm seeking Zion, I'm seeking truth. I'm searching for the way to find my place with you.